and she just has to suck the depression out of them. Hi, my name's Romy, Cassio is just here, Mushy Boy is sniffing the toy basket, and I spent way too long reading vampire novels because I wanted to know just how inherently gay they are. So within me there is an inherent knowledge, I don't know where it came from, I think it's always been there, that vampires are pretty fruity. So I decided to take it upon myself to do some very scientific research, and I gathered about me 13 different vampire books. And I read them all. I quizzed these books on certain criteria, like, is there vampire werewolf homoerotic beef? Are there vampires? How fruity are they? And one other criteria that I can't remember, as well as collecting a whole range of quotes for a fun little vampire song, which you'll hear at the end of this video. So to answer my question, how fruity are vampires? I guess you'll have to watch this really, really long video, because if I had to read 13 bloody books, you can sit through me talking about them for 32 minutes.
That's right, I did it. I went for one of the big boys. Is there some historical relevance? Are they both just like too full of you're just so muscly and incredible, I want to be with you. Ugh! It's not a vampire book. Very saucy. You know how I said that I trawled Goodreads and my library to find books that came up when I searched vampire? This came up. It's not a vampire book. The vampire is in it for maybe 4 pages, and he is not even a secondary character. He's not important. No one cares about him. Number 2 is Dungeons and Dragons: Shadows of the Vampire. You would think we would get some really good vampire content in this because it's literally in the title, and I really hope that we would literally have a vampire as a main character. But no, we've only got boring Count of Strahd, who I didn't know was a vampire, and his whole deal is like, you can't outrun me, I'm so much faster than you. You can't fight me, I'm so much better than you. I think he's been spending too much time with Edward Cullen because I've heard it all before. We again face the tale all this time in this little Dungeons and Dragons Shadow of the Vampire graphic novel because the vampires and the werewolves, they hate each other so much. It's the villains to lovers. The vampires are in control of the werewolves, and then as punishment for being a werewolf who's a naughty puppy dog, you get turned into a vampire, and they're all like, no, we don't want it to happen, and then they're like, well, we love being vampires. So I really think there's like a lot of lust going on with these guys. It's showing like a dozen vampires on the cover, but that didn't happen. It was just Mr. Blockhead. Mr. I'm so fast, the only thing that could possibly kill me are my memories. So we're like 4 vampires in this, one of them being County Boy, and they were pretty boring. There were 3 really attractive vampire ladies, so it was a win, but we lose points for the Count of Strahd because he was boring. Hunt on Dark Water. Does it have vampires in it? Yes. Does it win the award of being the worst book I've read this year? Yes. First of all, is there vampire, werewolf, homoerotic beef in this book? No. Damn you. What would I rate the vampires on the fruity scale? There's only 1 vampire that we're shown in this book, and she is hella queer, so 10 out of 10. Are the vampires good or evil? Hunt on Dark Water tries to do the thing where it says who gets to decide who are monsters, whilst also being like,
and that's a monster. Well, why is it a monster? Because I decided it was a monster.
Doesn't do it very well. I can see what it's trying to do, but it just doesn't do a good job of it. The vampires in this book are kind of all-powerful killing machines. Are there vampires? Yes, there are vampires in this book. It'll become important in another review. Why I have to ask that question. There are vampires in this book. Hunt on Dark Water's made me very happy because you meet a vampire in like the first page and she is gay, and it proved all of the points that I have no need to be proved because I know the truth. Vampires are all queer. They're all utterly fruity. Some interesting points for this book. I really didn't like this book. I struggled to get through it. I disliked both the main characters. I didn't like their romance, and I didn't like the copious amounts of time they spent undressing each other. I didn't like the plot. And I found it really strange that if you've lived for hundreds of years, like you're an immortal vampire, you choose to wear athleisure. That is your like go-to fit. Athleisure. There was a quote about how vampire culture mimics capitalism. I didn't understand it, but I thought it was a very funny comparison to make with no explanation. We also met a very interesting type of vampire called a bloodline vampire. I don't know enough about vampires to know what a bloodline vampire is, but basically when they bite, they can choose where your blood goes to. So bloodline vampires can instantly give you an orgasm. I don't know if vampires in this book drink blood, but I know that with their bite, they can get you going. Chibi vampire. I didn't know what this was when I got it. I'm just going to read you the part of the back cover. Once a month, she experiences intense bleeding from her nose. We're talking gushes! Alright, is there vampire werewolf homoerotic beef in this?
No, there's no werewolves. There's just vampires for some reason.
Vampire fruity scale. Vampires were all like super straight. Kind of sexualized, but super straight. But at the same time, her parents were uber fruity. They just were, so it hits the fruity scale.
All the vampires in this book, good or evil?
We kind of get the feeling that her parents,
The vampire mummy and daddy, are not the greatest people.
but everyone else is kind of just like very fine. Neither good nor bad. Morally ambiguous. Fine. Are there vampires? In Vampire Chibi Vampire, there are vampires. There are gushes. There are blood-nosed gushes because once a month, if this little vampire called Karen, if Karen doesn't do a bite, the blood builds up in her. She has so much blood. She has too much blood. She's kind of an anti-vampire in that she's still a vampire, but she, instead of needing blood, she needs to get rid of blood. Which they don't do a good job of explaining because they kind of make it look like she's drinking blood, but she's actually if she doesn't release that blood into someone's neck, which gives them like so much energy, so she's doing them a favor apparently. If she doesn't release that blood, she has a gusher of a blood nose. It looks like she's hemorrhaging. It looks like she could just stand up and twirl and paint a room. She could probably fly off into the stratosphere with just the power of those gushes. Also, the vampires in this book have like their specialty types of blood. They don't just drink blood. They don't just want anyone's blood. They want their special type of blood, which is the blood that each vampire is specifically drawn to. So Karen, we find out, maybe is drawn to depressed people's blood, but you suck out whatever it is you're drawn to. So if you really like the blood of someone who's super stressed, you like stress blood, you suck the stress out and you get all the stress, and it makes vampires feel great apparently. And then the person's like, I'm not stressed anymore, wow! And I think Karen's thing is that it's people who are depressed. And she just has to suck the depression out of them. It's not good. It's not good. Dark Hunters Volume 1. Is there vampire werewolf homoerotic beef? Not that we see in this book, but you know, I have a feeling it's coming. There are kind of werewolves. They don't call them werewolves. And someone says, oh, so just werewolves? And they're like, not really. I'm pretty sure they're just werewolves. Vampire fruity scale. These vampires were pretty fruity. They were pretty fruity. The relationships that we are shown are all heterosexual, but these vampires. Are the vampires in this good or evil? The vampires, oh my god, there were so many layers. There were too many. So there's vampires. Vampires are bad, but then there's also vampires, and they were vampire hunters, and they were still vampires, but they weren't vampires. So there were bad vampires, and then there were good vampires that were vampires, but they weren't vampires. And they're good and bad. They're good and bad. And it's not some are good and some are bad, it's all bad vampires are bad, all vampires are bad, and then there's the vampires who are not vampires but are vampires, and they're all good because they have to hunt the vampires who are all bad. Are there vampires in Dark Hunters? Yes, there are vampires, but there are too many types of vampires. There are too many vampires. There's a thing in this book called daemons, which are, quote, vampires on steroids with a god complex. I can't explain that to you, and I can't remember if the book explained it to me. I'm not reading it again to find out. In this book, vampires drink blood, but not because they want to drink blood, it's because they want to get your soul, and if they drink your blood, they eventually get your soul, and vampires need souls to keep living, because they're kind of all cursed gods, kind of, because there are actually Greek gods in this. So the vampires are all kind of cursed, and they can turn extra bad and go around drinking up people's souls, but a soul only lasts a few days, so then they have to keep doing it. Please don't make me read this again. The Wern books are Be Wary of the Silent Woods Volume 1. Let me just read to you the back cover. In the Night Realm, vampires, shifters, worms, and other things passing for human prowl the streets. Word number 5. Vampires. There are no vampires in this. There are no vampires in this. Not a one. So, let me just... Is there vampire, werewolf, homoerotic beef? No, because there's no vampires. No vampires. Apparently they exist, but they're not in this. Vampire fruity scale. I don't know. Because they're not in it. Vampires good or evil? There are no vampires. In the Night Realm, there's no vampires. There's no vampires. Are there vampires? That's why I had to add this question. Because no. It's book 1 in a series, and I think it's based on a novel maybe. So maybe there's vampires in that, but don't put vampires on the back cover. Yeah, there's no vampires, because I got this. And it was either Goodreads telling me it had vampires, or my library telling me it had vampires, and there's no vampires. It was cute, but there were no vampires. My roommate is a vampire. Alright, first of all, is there vampire, werewolf, homoerotic beef? No, but apparently there are werewolves in this, because the werewolf who's... The sun is so bright. As a vampire makes a joke that he told his vampire friend that it was a werewolf head he was giving him as like a taxidermy thing to make him look really cool, but really it was from Disneyland. So that means werewolves exist and vampires don't like them. So I actually think that yes, there is homoerotic werewolf vampire beef. Tick! Vampires on the fruity scale. We do, however, get told that in the earlier days of our vampire's life, when he was a terrible, evil, vicious monster, he had relationships with women and men. So, vampire fruity scale, tick. I wish that we had had some kind of representation other than this throwaway comment, which is also like, in the dark days of my life I used to be with anyone. Now I've seen the light of this human woman. So, you know, he's fruity, but we don't get good representation. Maybe it wasn't meant to come across as awfully as it did, but it really wasn't great. Vampires, good or evil? Again, there are levels. The main vampire, he's so good, but he's different than all of the other vampires, because all of the other vampires, they like feeding from humans, but he won't do it. He takes blood from blood banks most of the time. There's a few things that happen in this book where he's like, no, I would never do that. Almost never do that. And then Cassie is like, oh, I think we'll have to talk about that later, and they never do. So he's like, I only ever drink from blood banks, mostly, if I can help it. Whereas other vampires, most vampires aren't like that. They love hunting people, and they love taking all of the blood from the blood banks. He only takes what he needs. He's different. He's sensitive. So you kind of get the idea that all vampires are not like him, and maybe all vampires just have relationships with everyone, but that's because they're not good vampires. He's a good vampire, so he only has a relationship with one woman. And finally, are there vampires? Yes. Thankfully, in a book called My Roommate is a Vampire, there are vampires. Vampires in this are a little bit different than other vampires because every vampire has a special skill, a special ability, except for Frederick's best friend, Reggie, who kind of has two skills because he can fly. He can float around a la What We Do in the Shadows. He can't turn himself into a bat. They do make a joke about turning themselves into a bat, but apparently that doesn't happen most of the time. But all vampires have a special skill. And some vampires can fly. Some vampires can fly and also change wine into blood, but then curse their best friends to sleep for 100 years. And some vampires can conjure fruit when they're anxious, and those are the three skills that we learn. There's a real lack of distinction when it comes to vampires and their teeth, because some vampires' teeth come out like little Wolverine claws, and some vampires, like in this, cloak their teeth, so their teeth are always there, but humans can just never see them. And some vampires, I assume, have their teeth all the time, but usually it seems like they just go and they pull their incisors out. An interesting fact, vampires can't have a really good time with their partner in a romantic situation unless they have a little bit of blood. So they can really be enjoying themselves, but they can't really enjoy themselves unless they just get a little bit of blood. Don't know why. There was a pretty funny section in this where Frederick's like, oh my god, I've never felt like this for a woman in 100 years. Cassie's making me feel all of these things. It's not right. No woman's made me feel like this in 100 years. And then you find out like 30 pages later that he has been in a coma for 100 years. So that really didn't make the impact that you thought it was going to make, Frederick, my love. That really didn't. That statement means literally nothing because no one's made you feel anything for 100 years. You've been in a coma.
Sheila, the vampire, dancing with the enemy.
I've made lots of notes and then I kind of gave up making notes because there were too many things to make notes about. Let's have a look at the things that wants to do on the list.
Is there vampire werewolf homoerotic beef?
No.
There aren't werewolves in this. There are vampires and witches. And let me just say,
There's a bit of homoerotic beef happening between the vampires and the witches. But also there's a bit of homoerotic beef happening with literally everyone. We are guided in the direction of being like, this same-sex relationship, this heterosexual relationship. And yet all of the actual like characterization, maybe everyone's just in love with Sheila, right? Because it seems like every time she comes into a room, all of the women would pretty much be willing to strip down. But maybe that's just Sheila. She's not like other girls. Vampire, fruity scale. As I was just saying, so Sheila is only interested in men, but the characterization of her romance with men is that she kind of, oh, he's pretty nice, I quite enjoyed that kiss, and oh my god, I hate my husband, I'm pretty glad he's dead. But then she's in a room with women and, oh no, we have to kiss? Oh, that wasn't great. I'll have to think about this man I want to kiss. And all of the other women are like, excuse me? What do you mean? It wasn't that bad. And she's like, it's like kissing my sister. Oh, we'll have to do it again. And they're like, it wasn't, you know, I was kind of into it. It wasn't that bad. She's like, it's alright. Well, I'll do it again because I need to for safety. Sheila, the main character, has a little vampire crony, has a little vampire crony, and every time they are in the same room, they are pinching each other and giggling, and they seem to hate each other, but they also love each other, and then there's like a sibling relationship, but if it was a sibling relationship, there's not going to be, oh Naomi, let me just pinch you on your butt, oh, Naomi, Sheila, and literally Naomi coming and like cupping Sheila's boobs, and they're, every time they meet, actually 90% of the times they meet, they are like pinching or tickling each other and like queer relationships in this are not shown in a positive light. They barely get any time, and yet the way that queerness is written into this book intentionally or otherwise. Very much feels fetishy, but also every woman who meets Sheila is pretty much in love with her. Oh no, we have to flirt? This is really hard on me. I wish we didn't have to. No, it's alright, I'll keep going. No, don't stop. Whereas then Sheila sees an attractive man and it's written that she's basically instantly in love with him. Even though she does not have any of the connection that she creates with any of the women she shares rooms with. So there's that. I think it's pretty damn pretty.
Vampires, good or evil? Vampires are all evil and wretched and terrible,
But not Sheila, because she's a half vampire. So a full vampire has to be bitten by a vampire and then a spell put on them. But a half vampire is bitten by a vampire and then kills the vampires trying to put the spell on them. And then they become a half vampire with special abilities, which means that they can bite someone who is near death's door and then lick the wound, and then the person's like, ba-ba-da-ba! There's a scene where Sheila has saved someone's life and the family's like, well, thanks for that, we're giving you to the magistrate and you're going to be staked and you deserve to go to hell because that's where all vampires should be. And Sheila's like, wow guys, that's tough. I just saved your daughter's life. And then they're like, well, you deserve to rot in hell. So, you know, we're doing our due diligence, but also, would you just bite me real quick because I am lame and impotent and you would be really helping me out. And Sheila's like, no, I don't think I'm going to. And they're like, you really do deserve to die. You could do this one nice thing for me. You know, you're in our dungeon in our castle, so you could just help me out. I hope you die. And that happens a lot of times. Every human hates vampires. And the vampires don't really like each other. But everyone is obsessed with Sheila and she's kind of not like other girls. Vampire. Vampires are not good. Vampires are not inherently bad, and yet they are for some reason written that they are inherently bad, other than Sheila and some of the time Naomi, her crony. And finally, are there vampires in Sheila, the vampire, Dancing with the Enemy? Yes, there are vampires. There are vampires, there are vampire hunters, there are little witches who come out of the forest with their magic wands, which they then turn off and then they turn them back on, which very much made me feel like I was cosplaying Glinda the Good Witch with a plastic wand. For like half of the book, Sheila spends it pretending to be a man, but every woman who sees her is like, you're a woman. And Sheila's like, I'm wearing 4 corsets and I've got a fake moustache on. And the women are like, that's alright, I don't mind it, it's not bad. The first page, some kids are running after a cart being like, ha ha, our mum's a vampire, she's gonna die. And the mum's like, you and your bloody father sold me off for a bounty, you're gonna regret this. And they're like, we're gonna have a better mum who doesn't drink blood and leave us alone on the full moon. Loser!
If a vampire gets too into drinking the blood, it comes out of their nose in little bubbles. So like Chippy Vampire had it right.
There's also a big presence of vampire hunters in this, and what they do, they are vampire hunters. They have special dogs that can sniff out vampires and tear them apart, and then they spray holy water on you to immobilize you, put a garlic wreath around your neck, silver manacles on your arms, and the silver and the garlic makes you burn, as does sunlight. But if you're a half vampire, and if you let a full vampire drink your blood if you're a half vampire, then the dogs can't sniff you, the hunter hounds can't sniff you, and you're immune to the poison of sunlight and holy water and everything. Basically, you're like a human, but you still need to suck blood if you're just a vampire, but better, really. We've got Carmilla, the graphic novel. So Carmilla is the vampire book that came before Dracula, which is really interesting. I'd never heard of it, and it sounds fierce, but I'd like to read it. I'd like to read the novel, but there were a few excerpts of the text and it's really dense and boring, so I'm glad that I got to read this graphic novel. So Carmilla is a novel which exists under a different name inside this graphic novel, which is called Carmilla the First Vampire. But also in this graphic novel exists the real life Carmilla. So it's kind of a story inspired by this fictional book, but inside the story, the fictional book is real, and so is the vampire. Is there vampire werewolf homoerotic beef? There is not. And there seems to be only like one vampire. Vampire fruity scale. Well, Carmilla the vampire is a lesbian, so interestingly, the book, the back cover says, set in 1996, the year of the rat, when I was born. An idealistic Chinese American social worker turns detective when she discovers young homeless LGBTQ women are being murdered. So that's actually not true. Women do get murdered in this, but they never actually explicitly say that these women are queer. I guess because Carmilla is queer, and she only goes after women, the implication is that these women are queer, but you know, that's not necessarily how it works. Just because you're queer, it doesn't mean the person you're interested in is queer. So that wasn't made clear at all. Vampires, good or evil. So there's only one vampire in this, and she is the big villain. And Carmilla is not technically a vampire, but a Chinese vampire zombie, or Jianqi. She is kind of an embodiment of evil. She's vicious, she's villainous, and she can transform into a dragon, which is really, really cool. And finally, are there vampires? Yes, there are vampires. They talk about vampires, but there's only one vampire, so I don't know. Carmilla is very interesting, and I liked how gay it was. And it did make me want to read the original, but again, it seemed like the original might be kind of boring. I'll give it a try, but I'm also not running to give it a try. I didn't think there were werewolves in this, but I'm checking my notes and werewolves were mentioned, but they're not real. So no, but also maybe. Okay, some interesting factors about Carmilla, the first vampire. Carmilla only attacks women, which is both to quench her thirst and her lust. There was some intense homophobia and transphobia in the last 5 pages with slurs and, you know, dead naming, and it was rough. And to have not had that at all, you know, the characters just happened to be queer, but they didn't receive hate for it. To suddenly be like, oh, by the way, this character, they're trans, and let's have some trans slurs, and it felt really unnecessary the way that it was done. And having it in the last 5 pages as well, I was just like, no. Seraph of the End, Vampire Reign Volume 1. This is the first out of all of the vampire books that I've read that I want to read the next one of. So a couple of them have been standalones, but then I've read a couple of manga and graphic novels, and I'm like, no, I don't really need to read any more. This one was interesting. I really quite like this one. Vampires, if they get a limb chopped off, they can just go and it's back. I didn't know that could happen. Vampire werewolf homoerotic beef? No, because there's no werewolves. There's only vampires. Vampire fruity scale? The vampires, you know, don't seem to have relationships with anyone or show any interest. There's a vampire who's meant to be like really attractive, and he's like, child, I like your blood, it's delicious, come to my house and I'll drink your blood, which felt a little weird. Vampires, good or evil? The vampires, without fault, are vicious, evil, villainous cretins who have fooled the world into thinking there's been a plague, but also maybe there was a plague, but also they've taken all of the children in Tokyo underground and they drink their blood. Are there vampires? There are a lot of vampires, but only the noble vampires get to show their faces. All of the other vampires have to wear little hoods. Now, interestingly in this, there's a lot of lore in this one. Like, suddenly all of the adults in Tokyo died because there was a plague that didn't kill kids if they were under 13. So then the vampires came up from underground, which is where no one knew they'd been living apparently, but they'd always been living. And they were like,
everyone's dead other than you kids. Come underground and we'll take care of you, but also we'll drink your blood. I was very confused at the beginning because these children are talking about like the orphanage where they lived and how their family, because they're all orphans, and I was like, okay, because all of the adults have died. But no, they were already orphans living in an orphanage in Tokyo, with like the most traumatic backstories, that these kids are like, this happened to me, ha ha ha, this happened to me, and I'm not sad. And I'm thinking like, what is happening? Because there's steep trauma. These are some really dark things that these kids are like, yeah, this happened to me too. It's fine. I'm happy because I have my family here. And these are like 4-year-olds. And also the vampires have pointy ears in this. This is not something that I have seen in any of the other vampire books, but I kind of liked it. And like I said, vampires apparently can just have a limb chopped off. Someone gets their arm chopped off and she just grabs it and puts it back on. She's fine. Dracula Everlasting. This is my second manga that I want to read more of. This is the only second book that I want to read more of. It's really corny and really silly, but I enjoyed it. So this is about the offspring of the original people in Dracula, because in this world Dracula is a book, but it's also real life, and the authors of this are saying, you know, Bram Stoker really believed in it, so what if it's real? You know, I don't know the history about Bram Stoker's belief in the reality of Dracula. I think that's really interesting, but there was some excerpts of original letters between Bram and his publisher in the back, and I feel like they might have, like, the language might have been updated for modern reading, and it didn't read well. Vampire and werewolf homoerotic beef. No, there's no werewolves. There's only vampires. Where are my werewolves? Vampire fruity scale. So, Dracula exists in this, right? And he comes back to kind of stare out of mirrors and then assert control over the body of Jonathan Harker's like great grandson. And then he's like, this thing happens, and Dracula comes up and he's like, nobody spurns my host body. And I don't know, Dracula seems pretty fruity, and the people who care about Dracula are really obsessed with him and have been like living generations to serve him. So I would say it's pretty fruity. Vampires, good or evil? So there's only one vampire, and it is Dracula, and he instantly goes on kind of a killing spree. He's a baddie, but he also does like a lot. He poses a lot. Are there vampires? Yes, there are vampires, or rather, one vampire singular, Dracula. So this is a pretty simple but very amusing kind of take on the Dracula mythos reborn. I don't know why it says mythos and not just myth. I would read the next one in this because it's funny, and Dracula and his best bud, Hot Renfield, go out and like lie in their castle which is being built, which seems very queer. Take your best bud and manservant out to the castle to hang out together. There's also a character who looks just like Jane Lynch, which is really weird. That's right, I did it. I went for one of the big boys. I listened to Dracula. This experiment, test, scientific process. I wasn't sure if I was going to go for like really well-known titles at this stage. I still don't know if Twilight's going to turn up on here, but Dracula was probably the first vampire book I was ever introduced to, and the Richard E. Grant audiobook holds a special space in my heart, so I listened to it. It was interesting. Dracula, I think, has some of the most interesting requirements for being a vampire. I made a list. Here's some interesting things you should know about Dracula. He has hairy palms, pointed ears, sharp fingernails. He can control wolves, but also turn into a dog or wolf. He's very possessive over Jonathan Harker. He can see in the dark. He can be super small and can turn into fog. Dracula can only pass water at the slack
or the run of the tide. And interestingly, you can only become a vampire if a vampire kills you, but then brings you back to, I don't know. Vampires can go around drinking people's blood and it doesn't turn them all into vampires, but if Dracula, I think, drained you and then gave you a bit of his blood, you turn into a vampire. I'm not really sure how it works. It was interesting. Now, for the test. Is there vampire and werewolf homoerotic beef? Well, Dracula is a vampire and a werewolf, so I would say tick. Vampire fruity scale. Dracula is incredibly possessive over Jonathan Harker, so much so that when the 3 vampire women that he keeps in his castle go to drink Jonathan's blood, he's like, no, he's mine, don't touch him, you can't be here. And it really did read as very queer to me, so very fruity. Are vampires in this novel good or evil? They are all evil. They're all villainous. There's only 4 vampires, Dracula and his 3 little vampire children, women. They're all evil. And apparently other vampires, thankfully with a title like Dracula, there's a few. Yes, there are. I'd just like to say that this book, vampire propaganda, Baby's Classics Dracula, I thought it might give an interesting insight to, you know, that's enough, said the professor, no more biting. Written for the vampires, by the vampires, that's my take. Before we get to the nitty gritty of this one, let's just run through the checklist. Vampire and werewolf homoerotic beef, kind of, because the werewolf in this case is a human who can shapeshift into any animal or creature he wants, but he chooses a dog, so I'm saying that's a big yes. Vampire pretty scale. We do see a few depictions of queer vampires. We'll get to that. We'll get to that. Not all representation is good representation. Keep that in mind. Vampires good or evil? Very much portrayed as 50-50. Vampires can be like humans, in which case they are good, or vampires can follow their instincts, in which case they are terrible. But you know, we're meant to be rooting for Bill, the main love interest in this book, and he's terrible. He's terrible. So if I had read this and he was the only vampire, I would say, yeah, the vampires are all evil, because he's terrible. And finally, are there vampires? Yes, there are a few vampires, but technically they're not vampires, they're just humans who got a virus and died and woke up again. They're really vampires. I was very much aware of True Blood, so I thought it would be interesting to read this. It was not good. This is not a good book. It features dubious consent. It features just the relationship is really, you're meant to like it, I'm assuming, but I did not. It's also got that amazing trope of, I'm the main character, everyone's in love with me. I don't even know why though, which was very tiring. And there's this vampire who's like the head honcho of all of the vampires, and he's meant to be 1,000 years old, and I'm sure I read that he was like, looked like an 80-year-old or something, so that's how I was picturing him. I was picturing him as like the grand dame of vampires. More and more he was very interested in Suki, and everyone else was like, oh my gosh, I wish I was you. I wish he was that interested in me. And I looked it up and they've cast him in the show as like a young guy, and that's when I realised that he was in fact the third love interest. But I didn't find that out until the scene where she looks over her shoulder and sees the full moon, and then he floats up grinning at her after she's had a concussion, which was haunting and not in a good way, in a what the hell is going on way. There's quite a few secondary characters who are queer in this, but that representation is, you know, down there with some of the worst that I've ever seen. I don't know if the intention was to portray Suki as this character who's very sheltered. So a guy she works with at a bar is gay, and she's like, it might unsettle other people, but you know, I'm used to him now, which was kind of said as a ally. Tolerating someone is not the same as accepting someone. I don't know, I got the feeling we were meant to say, oh, Suki, you're doing such a good job, babe. And instead I was like, do you think you're doing a good job, babe, by tolerating your co-worker who's just a genuinely nice guy? And this also came after some comments had been made in Suki's mind about Lafayette, so. But then there's also some vampires who are queer, and there's this whole scene which is very like sexually aggressive and explicit, and it's only when she sees two guys kissing that she's like, I feel like I'm gonna be sick. And then she sees someone getting very handsy with the lower level of a body, and she's like, well, that's obscene. So it's just the guys kissing making you feel like you're gonna hurl. Okay, ally. The most interesting book was the way they did vampirism, but that was really just a cover, and it was really interesting. But for some reason the main vampire, Bill, and I meant to take a vampire seriously whose name is Bill, because I don't. For some reason the main character, he decides he wants to be like humans, he wants to go mainstream, and he moves into like the old family home or a relative's home or whatever, and he goes into the graveyard at night and sleeps in a grave every night, every day. Also apparently every single vampire is like ridiculously horny for some reason.
Deathless, breathless, living creatures are supposed to breathe. My bite is orgasmic. I thought it was just a meal.
The Prince of Darkness has returned.
She's mine, she's mine, she's mine.
Get in my way and I will drink you dry. How do you kiss if it's been 300 years
How
since?
does it begin, or more importantly, how does it end? Get in my way and I'll drink you dry. We live in a savage world, so don't expect chivalry. He wasn't blushing. Could vampires blush? I like my blood spicy and bitter. I thought it was just a meal. I execute things that go bump in the night. If I wanted to kill you, don't you think you'd already be dead? Don't you think? Living creatures are supposed to breathe. I thought it was just a meal. She's mine.